Hi, this is Dr. Cindy Woody back here to help you with your PASL test if you're working on your submission. Today we'll be talking about the artifact that you attach to PASL textbox 1.2.1. And I want to apologize in advance because there's a lot of numbers when we talk about textbox 1 and step 1, those kinds of things, step 2. So please bear with me. I'm trying to help, and hopefully this information will be useful to you and maybe reassure you that you can do this. Okay, so let's look at task 1, step 2, researching and developing the plan. This is what PASL asks you to do. They want you to identify research, school and district resources, community and cultural influences to support the identification of a problem and challenge. So basically you're going to be looking at 3 things, and it identifies it here down in the yellow. The significant research you conducted or consulted, the school and or district resources that you used when you did your homework, and what school, community, and cultural influences affected the development of the plan. So each one of these will, when you write the written commentary, you're going to explain in your written commentary how gathering and reading and learning about this research helped you understand how to develop a plan to tackle the problem that you've chosen to work on. So let's look at a little more depth here. So let's look at the 3 types. So A is research, either conducted by yourself or someone else. So as you write out your written commentary, you're going to actually include an A, a B, and a C in your written commentary box, and you're going to show that you've done all 3 of these things before you developed a plan. So A is you've read and studied the body of research, or you conducted research yourself. I think that one's probably a little less likely, but depending on where you did your principal preparation, you may have conducted research on this topic that you've chosen to work on. So I can think of a lot of different topics. Obviously, there's hundreds, thousands of, an unlimited number of problems that you could be working on solving on your campus. So let's look at B. B is district or school resources. C is school, community, and or cultural influences. They expect you to have looked at all 3 of these and to be able to prove that you looked at them in your written commentary. And then it's going to ask you to give one artifact that sort of demonstrates a sample of the kind of research that you used. So first in 1.2.1, they'll ask you to identify what you did for your research, your background information. And then it will connect in 1.2.2 when they ask you to justify the ideas for your plan based on the data you collected in step 1 and the research that you did in step 2. So in other words, we're not just making up a plan. We actually have a reason for why we've chosen to take these steps that we've taken. So my suggestion to you is, as you try to tackle 1.2.1, is to write out some really plain language first, so plain that you really can clearly see in just a sentence or 2 what you did in each area, and then you can go back and elaborate. And so once you have this plain language written out for step 1, you can start looking for a step 2 action step, is what in my description sounds like something I could actually screenshot and put into my paper that makes me look like an informed leader, a connected leader who understands the context in this problem. And then in step 3, you're going to create a single page. And so for your single page, and I'll show you how to do this in a second, you can either put a screenshot of one thing, like the cover sheet of an article, or a page from a teacher manual, or survey results is always a good one. Or if you feel like you have several good things, you can't decide which one, you can combine them onto a single page with smaller screenshots and then little headers or titles, subtitles underneath to explain what they are. So let's go on and give some examples. Let's see here. Let's practice. Now remember, what I have here for you, this is just a very brief statement that I would have written for myself as a draft. And honestly, I didn't choose a very great problem because, as you know, you can't copy what I've written here because that would be cheating. So I didn't want to accidentally put some really wonderful ideas that you need for your paper that you're really doing and you really, it would fit great, and then actually get you in trouble for, plagiarizing or whatever. So I've picked a mediocre thing here. So let's say your problem at your school is summarization skills. Your students over time just have demonstrated a consistent struggle in understanding how to summarize passages. And that has been a problem on your campus, and you've explained why. You've used the data to show that. Now we're going to do the homework to show that summarization skills are important and that there are some proven strategies that could help with summarization. So that's really part A. So for A, I located 4 great articles on improving instruction on summarization skills, and I took them to the Literacy Task Force. Task Force members also brought in 6 more good articles on this topic. Our favorite article was Teaching Summarizing so Students Actually Understand. Now let me say, this doesn't sound very scholarly, doesn't sound very high level, and it's really not. Like I could say I studied the body of research on this, which would be a much stronger statement. And that in studying the body of research, I identified some powerful, articles, brought them to the Campus Literacy Task Force. They did the same thing. We collaborated together, but it does kind of show that I am a collaborative leader, that we are looking at the body of research on summarization skills, and that we're identifying some really strong ones that we're going to use to guide our plan. And I would say that, like, this isn't enough. If you just write a few sentences like this, you're going to fail. We'll look at the rubric in a minute and see what you need to do. So for B, I met with our campus reading specialist who assisted me with locating campus and district resources such as teacher manuals, literacy kit, learning station guides, teacher training videos that address best practices and teaching summarization skills in all content areas. So you would probably need to go on and say, as you explain how this influenced your plan, we determined that these materials weren't being used in our school, or that they had been used in the past when we did better on this area and we had quit using them and now we're not doing as well. Or we identified some that were listed in the articles that we read in our PLC group, our literacy task force, that we actually owned on our campus, and we've decided that these would be good to help us develop our plan. And then for C, the PTO leadership committees helped me send out a parent survey to gather parent and guardian input on how to improve summarization skills for students on our campus. So there's lots of ways that you could gather campus information. You can do surveys, you can go to meetings, you can have a question and answer table at fun night. I mean, there's lots of things that you can do that would be unique and important to your campus to show that you have gathered this information. Remember, the reason that the developers of the PASL exam included this step is they understand, like we all do, that when you get a top-down mandate that's designed to improve a problem of practice at your campus, and it doesn't reflect anything about your campus, that mandate's not going to be successful. It's very unlikely that it's going to take root and work. So what you're trying to show is that this isn't just some random top-down thing that you just dreamed up and you thought, oh, this looks good. I read a book about this. I'm going to try doing this at my school. That you've actually taken the time to read the book, or to conduct the research, that you've actually looked into the resources you have that you may not be using, or maybe that are linked and already in place that could be strong supports, and that you have heard the voices of the people who will be doing the work, the teachers, the parents, the principal, the resources, the specialists on your campus, the students, that you've heard the voices of the people and that you know that they're going to need to be represented as you make a plan to attack this problem. So now let's talk about how you would pick your best sample to use for your artifact. So your sample needs to emphasize that before you created the plan to solve your problem, you did your homework as a leader. Okay, so where I gave you the example of I went and talked to the literacy specialist and she showed me some kits in the closet, that's not very strong, is it? Like if I turn in maybe a screenshot of a page from the teacher manual, what does that prove? Does it mean that I'm a great leader and I've done my homework? No. So you've got to be careful and think through the fact that your screenshot should show that you've really done your homework. Somebody asked, could they use a bibliography? You can use a bibliography if it really helped you to learn about the body of research on this topic, but is the bibliography going to be a living, breathing document that would help you with the research on your campus? it's harder to show that. So I would include it with other things if you're going to use a bibliography. So you're going to choose the item or items that put you in the best light. In the example problem, so I just gave you the example that we made up, summarization skills. So in the example problem, showing the first page of the favorite article from the PLC group or the summary report of the parent survey results can help the grader see that you're a collaborative leader who listens to the voices of stakeholders. So you see how even when we're conducting or reading about research, we still talk about that we reached out to the lead teachers or other stakeholders when we did the, came to a consensus on that this was the best body of research or part of the body of research to guide our plan. And then, like I said before, identifying the campus and district resources was a useful activity. Showing a page from the teacher manual or a learning station guide would provide less evidence of your ability to lead the instructional improvement work. So here's what it looks like if you want to, let's see if I can move it over here. If you want to show more than one thing on your page when you turn in an artifact, a representative page of your research and materials that you use to inform the development plan, maximum 1 page. That's the language from PASL. So bibliographies are acceptable, but make sure they tell the story of something you're trying to prove in your text box. Make sure to mention the artifact in your written commentary so the reader will know why and where it applies. So as you say, I met with the teachers and we had this task force, be sure and see artifact 2. Or, I did a survey, I included a snippet of it in artifact 2. Or you can just reference the number of the artifact as you upload your artifacts to the thing. You just put in parentheses 2. So here's where I combined the cover of an article. You remember how I said we had the article about teaching summarizing so students actually understand? I really did Google this article so I can get the screenshot for you. So here's a sample page from the article that I said I used. And then I made up a fake survey with numbers for you. And I included the results from the survey. And then I pointed out, I don't know if I can zoom in on here, I pointed out that the research article identified by the Literacy Task Force as most helpful for informing our plan to improve instruction was this one, and I gave a link to it. And then I talked about results from the 8-item survey created for the parents and guardians, distributed through the PTO email distribution list, and via paper copies at the whatever PTO meeting in October. Okay, so PASL recommends, and when they recommend it, I say do it, they recommend that you ask yourself these questions. So in the candidate's description of researching and developing a plan, where is there evidence of the following? So they're scoring you on this. The influence of the research on the development of the plan. So they're watching for this. Like, you can't just say I did this research. Like, I did this research and this is how it influenced the development of the plan. So I'm going to submit the article. Let's say I show the cover of the article and the survey results, and I also have talked about that there's maybe a Google spreadsheet with all of these district resources linked. And now I'm going to say, as we developed the plan, we had to consider that Lucy Calkins said that literacy should always include this or whatever, the body of research says. And that our parents said that their students really like to play games on their computer. And that the literacy specialist said that students in the past have had better results when the teacher would instruct them using exit tickets. So now all of these things make sense in your plan, that you didn't just pick something that you remembered from going to college. You're also going to show the influence of the school and district resources we talked about, the school and community resources. And why is the candidate's response limited and uneven? Okay, so if your response is not balanced, does that make sense? So if your A is huge, but your B is tiny, and then your C is tiny, why is that uneven? They're looking for evidence of that. And then here's the rubric. It might be easier. Let's see, I think I have it here. Let's see if I can move this over. Come on, technology. I apologize for that. We're having no help here. Well, we'll go back to the drawing board. Do you guys ever just shake your head at home and go, Dr. Woody? Okay, so here's part of the rubric, and I really prefer this part a little bit more to the other part because this part really does focus on the evidence of your plan. So for score 1, this is bad. If you make a bad score, the minimal score, this means that you have an inappropriate identification of significant research and the influence of the research on the development plan. Trivial identification of the school or resources or district resources, or minimal identification of the influence of the school community and cultural influences. So you remember how in the last one, the question was your response uneven? That's what that means. So if you make a 2, which is still failing, you don't want to make a 1 or a 2. You were inconsistent, your response was uneven, or you were limited. And then if you scored a 3, that means 3's passing, by the way, but it has to be combined with enough 3's and 4's to get you there. If you scored a 3, you had appropriate identification of significant research and the influence of the research on the development of the plan. That you had informed identification of the influence of the school and district resources, and that you had appropriate identification of the influence of school, community, and cultural resources. So it says school, community, and cultural resources. That's 3 different things there. And then a 4 is what you want. We're all going for a 4, right? We're not even looking at the 3. We're looking at the 4. Insightful identification of significant research and the influence of the research on the development of the plan. So let me just stop and say, if you have chosen summarization for your topic of problem of practice, you should be the expert now on summarization. You should know the names of all the people who've been important in this area and be able to rattle those off. So this is where it's talking about the insightful identification of significant research. You know, for this practice example I gave you, I literally just Googled articles on summarization, and then I just picked one. So would that be insightful? No. Would that be appropriate? No. Would that be inconsistent or inappropriate? Probably inconsistent. The resources I chose weren't inappropriate. They just were sort of hit or miss because I just did a Google search. And then extensive identification of the influence of the school and or district resources on the development of the plan. And significant identification of the influence of the school, community, cultural influences on the development of the plan. So let me give you an example for B where it talks about extensive identification of the school and or district resources. So I think back, I was fortunate enough to teach in the same district for quite a few years. So a lot of us old people can say, right? Many years ago. But I did see us go through some cycles in literacy where we had adopted some grant funding, and because of that, we changed direction with our programming. And it took several years for the results of those changes to be seen, for better or for worse. Some were great, and some were lasting bad changes because of the changes, the direction we had taken. So where it's talking about extensive identification of the influence of the school and or district resources, that's what it's talking about. That's where, you know, you've been teaching 2 years, you're probably going to need to go and find somebody that's been on your campus a long time or in your district for a long time that can kind of give you the history of what the resources were in the area that you've chosen to study. So if you're doing, you know, secondary, post-college, post-high school science readiness as your problem, college readiness in science, you're going to need to have somebody in your district who can tell you about the trajectory of science instruction in your district on your campus over time. And then you need a way to represent that in your written commentary. You may not have a great artifact for it, or it might be that you have like a wonderful written report or some data, some sort of listing of what's happened over time in the area that you've chosen to study, but you may not. And then the same thing for the significant influence of the school, community, and cultural influences on the development of the plan. So maybe your campus has changed demographically. Maybe it went from a different level of poverty or wealth, or maybe you had an influx of immigrants, or maybe maybe a lot of the people who attended your school have moved out, and so your student body has shrunk for lack of a more professional word, you can talk about those things and how that's changed your school. And so then that's a much richer explanation than somebody who maybe went to a PTO meeting and stood up on the stage and asked a few questions and left with that. So you can definitely see the difference in a 4 and a 2 or a 1 there. And let me go back up here real quick. Oh, sorry about that. This is a much longer portion of the rubric. We don't want to look at the 1 or the 2 because those are about partial evidence, are inconsistent, unable to do things, limited. We want to look at the 3 and the 4. So the difference in the 3 and the 4 is the 3 is effective, that you've shown effective evidence to demonstrate your ability to conduct and consult research. In 4, you've shown thorough evidence, like you really have explained your case well. And also that you have, it goes through each of the 3, that you've done your homework in the 3 areas and that these audiences' voices are heard. Whether the audience is, the voice is the voice of the researcher, the voice is the voice of the campus and the district, or the voice is the voice of the school and the culture and the community of the people that you serve. All right, so let's see if we can get back here to the PowerPoint with less, oh goodness. You're probably wondering why I don't just start over or edit this. Is because this video would never get to you. I've already had to start over several times because of interruptions. So we're just going to roll forward and get you in this test and get you done. Okay. So using the rubric to pre-score your work is very important. I want you to take the time to do that. And then the last thing I want to tell you is that there are practice examples. If you haven't watched my other videos, you may not be aware of this. But if you will Google PASL Library of Examples, that's the quickest way. It's easier than sharing the link on here because the links can change. But there are 2 examples in the library, PASL Library of Examples. They're scored for you, and one's good and one's bad. So take the time to read those and study them and find out what made them good and what made them bad. So you also could take the rubric and you could score them before you read about what made them good and bad. But I want you to study the feedback that you get and see if you agree, if you scored them well. Because at first I think, I know that when I first stumbled on the PASL when it was brand new for us in Texas, I could not wrap my mind around what made something good or bad. It was just all a big blur and just overwhelming, as you probably feel now. I feel much better about it now because of you guys asking me questions and putting me in the hot seat sometimes about what does this mean. But I feel really good about it, and I want you to feel good about it. I want you to just go in there and sit down and do it. It's not going to do it itself, and it's not going to be a quick thing, and you can't do it this weekend. It's just going to take time, and it's going to take effort, but you can do it. That's the thing, is you've got to just get on that horse and just ride it on down the road, because otherwise you're never going to get to be a certified principal. It's this thing there. You're going to feel so good when you're done with this test and you've passed it. You get your life back. You can quit worrying about PASL. Just go back to what you're doing and move on into those leadership roles. So thank you for bearing with me for a good 23 minutes. I appreciate you, and let me hear from you if you get stuck. Go pass your test.